backyard engineering going on here. I'm doing something that I've never done before, which is record a video to show you what I'm doing, and to take a 1985 Shortlander boat trailer and convert it into a pontoon trailer. Alright, let's see how it goes. First things first, we have to take off these guides in the middle. And then next we'll take off the fenders. As you can see, this is a V-hull boat trailer. So these things got to come off so we can make room for where the pontoon will hopefully end up. These bolts have been on here for a really long time, so you can see how rusted on they are. I came out last night and saturated them all with PB Blast to let them soak overnight, so it helps break loose the bolts. So here we go. Alright, so from years of experience, I know that the rusted bolts on here, it's not going to be just as simple to take off with a regular knife. So, my dad used to use this tool. I don't know, tool pipe for a breaker bar. That's going to help us get it off. Most of the components on the trailer are held on by these U-bolts. Some of them come off easier than others. This one's going pretty good. That's why that PB Blast helps. These nuts are really rusted. Alright, all 4 bolts are off now. All we need to do is tap out the U-bolts and take this piece off. This one might take a little coaxing. There we go. As you can see, all the guides have been removed from the trailer at this point. Pretty clean. These are still pretty structurally sound, and I may incorporate them into the underside of where the pontoon sits when this is finished. So I'm going to keep them for now because they may come in handy. Alright, up next is the fenders. Tires are pretty solid. There's a full-size spare to go with this trailer, which is nice. These fenders are very thin, and they're bolted on in 2 different places in the back, and then in the underside behind this metal piece. Sprayed those down with PB Blast last night, so we'll see how that goes. Could be a little bit more of an adventure. In order to get the fenders off, we need to use a socket wrench and then an open-ended wrench to hold the nut on the other side. Otherwise that thing's just going to spin and give you a headache. So for this one, I've got a 1932nd, sorry, open-ended wrench, and the socket we have on is a Stanley 9/16. There's where the 9/16 came from. Here we go. Spray these with PB Blast too. Got the first one off. Decided to switch it up to some vice grips to hold the nut in place. A lot easier to do than using an open-ended wrench that keeps slipping off, especially when you can't see. In order to get the other bolts off the front, I have to take off the trailer tire, so that was a little unexpected, but learn as you go. All right, so at this point we've got the fender off, as you can see. Still in pretty good shape. We'll save it for something else. But right now, got to put the wheel back on. All right, as you can see, the fenders are now off and the center guides are now off, and the trailer's pretty open at this point. So on to the next step. Altogether, taking the rims off and the center pieces off took about an hour's worth of work. Next step with the trailer was to get some cross beams to support the weight of the pontoon that will go on it. So in doing this, what we decided to do was go with 2x2 1/8 inch thick steel bars. We picked up 4 of those to go across, each measuring 6 feet. Found those at a local scrap dealer, 4 pieces, 24 feet in total, for $106. Pretty good deal. One of the bigger challenges with the trailer is going to be making sure that we have enough height to go above this wheel with these beams. One of the ways to get around that is to use 2x6. The 2x6 will be over the top of the steel beam, hanging over just slightly to accommodate the V bracket that will hold the 2x6s that raise up the pontoon. In order to fasten this to the trailer, we will need to drill through the wood, steel beam, and the trailer and support it with 2 10-inch galvanized bolts. Okay, on to the next step here. The next plan is to attach the steel to the trailer, and in order to get the height, we need to add a 1-foot section of 2x6 board underneath the V bracket, with the intention of bolting through the bracket, the wood, the steel, and the trailer to hold it all down. In order to do this, we need to get an accurate measurement for the V brackets on where the pontoon tunes will sit. Using C-clamps, I'm holding the bracket onto the piece of wood at the moment so that we can have room to adjust it when it's up against the pontoons. I've went ahead and made a makeshift ruler of sorts out of a 2x4, where I've clamped on the 2x6 section and the V bracket so that we can hold it underneath the boat, which is currently in the water, to get an accurate measurement of the pontoons. The 2x4 is a lot easier to hold than a heavy piece of steel up against the boat. Once we get that done and know our measurements, we will be able to secure the steel and the wood along with V brackets to the trailer. This will be done by using 10 1/2-inch galvanized bolts and smaller 1/2-inch galvanized bolts between the V bracket and the wood. These are 10 inches, and there will be 8 of them total. And these are 2.5 inches, and there will be 8 of them total. The finished ruler looks like this. That way it can be held up and lined up with the tunes. The boards can be marked, and then we can transfer the marks to the steel. After measuring at the pontoon, we've determined where it needs to sit for the tunes to line up exactly in the middle of the V bracket. So we have our measurements, which will translate from the 2x4 over to the steel. Eric is now cutting 1-foot section pieces for the V-brackets to sit on. 2x4 to line up the marks on the board, align with the steel. All steel is marked. Now we will be able to put the 1 foot pieces of 2x6 treated on there and determine where the holes need to be to drill through the wood, through the steel, through the trailer for the bolts. Alright, first beam is lined up with the 2x6 foot long piece of wood and the V-bracket clamped on. We've gone ahead and marked holes where the 10-inch bolts will be drilled through. So we're on to the drilling and fastening the first beam. Alright, bolting the last piece on with the galvanized bolt and nut, 10-inch bolt, 1/2-inch nut, and our first beam should be secure to the trailer. Alright, fully on the way it should be. After a few hiccups and some measuring challenges, as you can see, we've got the brackets in place and the beams in place with one more to go. And then after that we will mount the 2x8s, 2x6x8 onto the brackets so that the pontoons can go on them. Pretty sturdy all the way through. If you do this, make sure to get a hard metal drill bit. That was a situation we found out about. Alright, so we made a few adjustments to the trailer and got most of the V-brackets in place for the bunk positions. Some of the adjustments on the trailer included figuring out that a couple of the V-brackets were taller than the rest of them. So we decided to move those up front and make it so that the front of the pontoons will sit in the larger ones as they are 1 inch taller, so it should line up with the rest of them. So as you can see, the last support that we put across is a treated 2x6 with additional 1.5 feet 2x6 pieces bolted through the wood and into the trailer, again using the 10-inch lag bolts. Or not lag bolts, regular bolts, galvanized. And the larger V-brackets we put up in the front so that they line up with the rest of the smaller ones, and we didn't have to bring it up as high because these particular brackets are 1 inch taller than the ones behind them. The last beam in the back, for now, we left in place and bolted through two 2x6 1 foot sections, just to create a little bit of extra cushion underneath the pontoons should they sink that low. Although with the 2x6s that will go across on the bunks, it's unlikely that they'll sit there. But we have the ability to adjust this last beam if needed. So as you can see, all V-brackets are in place, all steel is bolted down, and we're ready to move on to the next part of the trailer. And one of our larger concerns was going to be about the height with the tires. With the V-brackets now in place, as you can see, this mock-up 2x6 laying across gives us a pretty good gap above the tire. Hoping that stays that way once we put the pontoon on and the weight is distributed and it doesn't sink as low. Time will tell as we continue to move forward on this part of the project. Another determining factor in the trailer is that we may need some additional length on the tongue. Depending on where the pontoon sits and where the deck ends up may determine if we need to add some additional length on the tongue or on the back of the vehicle for turns. Now we're ready to install the bunks onto the V-brackets for the trailer. Picked up some 2x6 8-foot pressure treated pieces They didn't have longer pieces due to coronavirus and shipping delays, so I had to go with what was available, which will work out fine. Using these 8-foot 2x6s, I will run the cords of the brackets up to the second set of brackets in the front, at which point I will take these other 8-foot pieces and split them in half so that there's 4 foot on each side for those brackets. That way there'll be 12 feet altogether of bunk space for the pontoon bunks. We will secure the bunks to the brackets with 5/16 bolts, carriage bolts, nuts, and washers. The next step is to mark the boards where we need to drill the pilot holes in order to put the bolts through. We have holes on the brackets, so we will mark them with a Sharpie on the underside of the board and then drill the holes through. You'll repeat the same process on the inside. Now that the spots are marked on the 2x6, we can drill our pilot holes for the bolts. Because they're 5/16 bolts, we have 5/16 nuts and washers. Next step is to tighten the bolts up with a socket wrench. This one's a 13mm. Now that the pilot holes are drilled, we were able to place the bolts through the brackets to be bolted. You can tap down the bolt heads to get them flush with the wood. It'll also give you more grip when you're bolting on the nuts and washers. Now with the bolts secure, we have our first set of bunks attached to the trailer and the V-brackets. As you can see, I cranked the bolts down pretty good so that they were a little bit below the board line to not rub against the pontoons. Plus we'll be adding carpet later. Okay, all 4 main bunks are now bolted on, as you can see. Got 8 feet on either side. Bolted through. Now in this next section, we'll be working with these guides on either side and these 2x6s and putting in 4-foot sections of guide boards the same way that we did these ones. All right, last section of bunk pieces are on. Took 2 2x6 8-foot boards and cut them in half, 4 foot each, to add these last extensions on to the bunks on both sides. All sides are now bolted down. 1 and 2. Next step is some carpet and then a test run. Picked up a 9x12 carpet, indoor-outdoor carpet section to put on the bunks. Got the first 2 done now. Held together on staples, cut them 10 inches so they'd fold over the sides. So far so good. Here.
Oh, yeah.
Pontoon is securely on the trailer now with ratchet straps on the back and also in the front, and the main winch strap. Still a pretty good amount of clearance. May add a hitch extension just to give me a little bit more room for turns, and a post that will go here that will hold the full-size spare up against the deck to create a stopping point so that the pontoon won't move forward. Quite a bit of space underneath the deck of the pontoon, so I may add storage bunks to the trailer, storage containers on the beams of the trailer. As I talked about earlier in the video, the height on the tire. At this point with the pontoon on, it's pretty tight on the tire. So we need to add an additional bit of height to get it up over that on this side. We're going to accomplish that by adding more V-brackets to this brace in the back that we didn't end up using, which is a good thing we left it because we have the opportunity to do that now. The opposite side has a little bit more of a gap, which is a good sign, so once we install the V-bracket on this side, it'll also raise it up.